But I want to start off with a quote from Diego San Pablo Perez. "The greatest journey I've taken so far is the one where I ended the alienation between me and all that I am. The one where I connected my light and my darkness, where I united what I wanted to know with what I didn't want to face. Only through the union and truthfulness did I begin to feel at home in my body." And that begins my journey here to the US. March of 1978, my parents escaped in the middle of the night from Laos. My mom was 8 months pregnant. I was 2.5 years old, and then I had a 1-year-old brother. We went down to the Mekong River, where a canoe was supposed to wait for us, but instead we were stood up, and my mom had to take the gold out of her dress to pay for another canoe to take us over. Once we got over to the Thailand border, soldiers were patrolling, and we had to sleep along the riverbanks because we were scared that we would be shot if found. The next morning, we made it to the Thailand refugee camp, where we stayed for about a year, and my brother was born there. Catholic Church here in the US sponsored our entire community of over 100 people. We landed right here in Mount Baker neighborhood, and I grew up here, Laotian, in a brand new country where my parents had no idea what to do or where to start. During our escape, I saw the resilience that brought my family from their fallen home over to a new world. Particularly resilient because both my parents summoned up the strength, the courage, and the determination to get their family to freedom. And I saw resilience in them. In their children, they saw hope. So beginning kindergarten year, I still remember till this day, it was called ESL back then, so that tells you my age, right? Because it's now ELL. But I remember my dad with the interpreter going up to the teacher and it's like, "She can't be mainstream. She needs ESL because I don't want her to have the accent. I don't want her to have the accent because I want her to be Americanized and don't want to be treated differently." So why I speak proficiently in English, but I also speak 3 different languages of Laotian at home, is because my parents refused to pass down their accent to us, so they spoke to us in Laotian, and I learned English from my white teachers at school. And every day I'm reminded of that, saying, "Your English is so amazing." Where did you learn English from? Clearly not from my parents, obviously from the white teachers that have taught me through most of my years. Growing up and being asked, "What are you? Where are you from?" is what I get all the time on a daily basis. Because of my big lips, my big butts, my curves, I'm not the traditional Laotian, size 0, skinny as a rail. So I didn't fit in Laotian, but I also struggled with being American. And through that journey, I learned how to hate myself. I learned how to be ashamed of my culture, my identity. I even gave myself a white name. It was Cindy for the longest time. Now I'm looking back, I was like, what the hell was I thinking? Right? And so growing up, everyone was like, "What are you?" I'm like, "Laotian." They're like, "What is that?" So finally I got so tired of teaching and so tired of explaining it, I was just like, "I'm Asian." Right? And that was perfectly fine for them because that's all they knew. I was called a fob, fresh off the boat. And then in my mind, I was like, I actually came out on a plane, so I don't know where you're getting that from. So it was such a confusing time for me growing up, right? And I remember Franklin High School was when the entire world opened up for me. I met so many people that were reflective of who I was, who had the same journeys I was going through, who had the same challenges with their parents. I had such a hard time being Laotian than I was American. So with that, she wanted to come and share my story. With that, I finally had to realize that I had a lot of self-reflection that I needed to do. And it wasn't until my dad, he told me I had to become a citizen because they were telling me that we wouldn't get any of our benefits if I didn't become a citizen. So here I was, taking the exam, the interview. And mind you, I don't know if you guys know, but back in the 80s, it wasn't called a green card, you were the resident permanent alien card. So if you came through the US back then, that's what your identity was. You were a resident alien here in the US. And so senior year I went, and granted I was still sometimes going by Cindy, sometimes going by my full name, Sieng. So as I sat across the lady that had just given me the task, she pushes over a piece of paper, and I thought, great, that's my certificate. She goes, this is the opportunity for you to become American, where you can make it easy for people to say your name. And I was like, I sat on it for quite a few seconds. And then I pushed that piece of paper back and I said, I'm fine with being Sieng. And a lot of people ask, why is storytelling so important? Why is relationship so important? It's important because with all of the technology that's going on here, we forget about that human interaction, right? We forget about breaking bread, sharing our stories, and connecting. I don't have a degree in education or social services. I have a bachelor's degree in fashion design and marketing. Yet here I am, 20 years under my belt in education and in nonprofit. I do what I do best because I'm coming from a place of authenticity. I don't pull any bullshit, excuse my language. And I tell it like it is, because only through truth can we really come out of the darkness. And if any of you guys have ever been in a room with me at a conference, at a meeting, I will call anybody and whoever out. A few months ago, we did a training over at South Shore for their faculty. A white teacher came up to me after my speech, and she said, "You really offended me because you told me you would not want me as your daughter's teacher." I have two girls, they're volunteering in the back. Poppy is biracial. I said, if you're gonna tell my daughter as she walks through that door that she is equal and she looks the same and has the same history and identity as everybody else, then I don't need you. She deserves better than that. And you are not gonna undo everything that I've worked so hard to instill in my child. And I left it at that. I didn't owe her anything else, but you will not be my daughter's teacher. And I think a lot of parents don't know that they have that sort of power. And schools now are expecting parents to engage without even teaching them how to engage. I know in my culture, we don't engage. Parents parent, teachers teach, and that was it. And they're doing this through a Western society lens. They don't understand that volunteering is a privilege. Parents work a 9 to 5. You cannot ask them to come in and volunteer during a school day. Seattle Public School District, every Wednesday, my little one gets out at 1:10. Who gets out at 1:10 from work? Those are the type of things that we need to think about when we're voting, when we're talking about education and equity, especially in our educational system, because people like me, a single mom who has 2 kids, who works a 9 to 5, but I know my privilege that I'm able to pick up my kids, that I'm able to bring them to work, whereas a lot of them don't. So when you vote, please think of that. And as to resilience and hope, those two words represent the confluence of two generations, two that follow in a long succession of first generations here in America. As in the nature of generations and all that precedes it, in hope and resilience, one exists because of the other, and together they represent a promise. One of hope in a new world, bringing the resilience of a people from the old world. It's a promise instilled in me, and I hope to have the resilience to keep for my children generations to come. As for our storytelling, our breaking bread, and our connecting with one another, Brene Brown said, "Our story can be hard, but not as nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not as nearly as dangerous as giving up on love and belonging and joy, the experiences that make us the most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light." Thank you.